Last week, I took an updated look at performance between the Ryzen 5 9600X and 7600X to see if Zen 5 had improved over the past year relative to Zen 4 for gaming, and the answer unfortunately was predictably no. The 9600X was 3 to 6% faster on average depending on the quality settings used, so very similar to what we'd found originally. In that video, I included the Ryzen 7 9800X 3D, purely as an indicator for whether or not the results were GPU limited. But this did prompt many of you to request a comparison between the 7800X 3D and 9800X 3D. Not just for a look at how the Zen 4 and Zen 5 architectures compare when using 3D V-Cache, but more because there appears to still be a good supply of 7800X 3Ds on the market, and they are quite a bit cheaper than the 9800X 3D in most regions. And therefore many of you want to know if it's worth spending more on the Zen 5 version, or save some money with the older Zen 4 model. Well, today we're going to find out, but before we do that, today's video is brought to you by Arctic and their return to the case market with the Xtender VG eATX mid-tower case featuring vertical GPU support. Designed to deliver maximum performance while still offering a visually impressive design, the Xtender VG is perfect for high-end builds that you want to show off. The panoramic glass panels perfectly showcase your hardware, while the pre-installed high-performance P12 and P14 Pro ARGB fans make sure it all stays cool. Inside, you can fit a pair of 420mm radiators and graphics cards as long as 360mm in either a vertical or horizontal configuration. The Xtender VG is available in white, black, and even a mirror black finish, so for more information, please check the link in the video description. Okay, so roughly this time last year, I did compare the 9800X 3D and 7800X 3D, and found that the newer Zen 5 model was an average just 8% faster across 45 games at 1080p, using an RTX 4090. So for the most part, there really wasn't much in it, though we did see some much larger gains in a few select titles, such as Starfield, Hogwarts Legacy, and The Last of Us Part 1, for example. So based on that previous and very in-depth testing, it's fair to say that for the most part, the 9800X 3D really isn't that much faster, but just to be sure, I've added the 7800X 3D to our most up-to-date data, covering 12 games. So let's quickly go over the numbers and then evaluate the current pricing in a number of regions. Of course, for this updated testing, we're using the RTX 5090, along with the latest BIOS for our X870E motherboard, and DDR5 6000 CL30 memory. Okay, let's get into it. Starting with Marvel Rivals, we see almost no difference between these two X3D chips, just a 1% uplift for the 9800X 3D, and this margin was seen using both the medium and ultra presets, so nothing to really see here. Oddly, we actually saw a bigger performance difference between the non-X3D 6-core parts, so that's a little bit unexpected. The 9800X 3D was only slightly faster in Rainbow Six Siege X, boosting performance by just 5%, and this margin was seen using both the medium and ultra plus presets. This is another example where the margin between Zen 4 and Zen 5 was actually larger using the non-3D V-Cache models. Assassin's Creed Shadows is more of a typical single-player title, like Black Myth Wukong for example, and by that I mean it's not terribly CPU demanding, and is instead much more GPU heavy. So as a result, we see very little difference between the Zen 4 and Zen 5 processors in this example. Testing with Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered saw the 9800X 3D delivering around 10% more performance than the 7800X 3D, so this is more what we'd typically expect to see. We're looking at just a 7% increase in Cyberpunk 2077 using the medium preset, and then just a 2% increase with the Ray Tracing Ultra preset. So although ray tracing does increase the CPU load, if the CPU is fast enough, you'll reach the limits of the GPU first. And that's exactly what's happened here, as the RTX 5090 caps out at just 130 FPS at 1080p. Space Marine 2 is a very CPU demanding title, but even so, the 9800X 3D was just 9% faster than the 7800X 3D when using the medium preset, and then 7% faster using Ultra. So not exactly amazing gains there. Previously, we saw that The Last of Us Part 1 provided the 9800X 3D with its biggest win, and this was seen about a year ago. The margins in The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered though aren't quite as impressive, though the 9800X 3D is still around 10% faster. The 9800X3D was 7% faster in Spider-Man 2 using the medium settings. However, it was 11% faster when using the maximum in-game settings, as this actually increases the workload for not just the GPU, but also the CPU, and it's here that the 9800X3D pulls out its biggest win in this title. We're only looking at up to a 3% performance boost from the 9800X3D in Mafia the Old Country, though the game does quickly become GPU limited using the epic quality settings. Now, the 9800X3D was 13% faster than the 7800X3D in ACC when using the medium settings, and again we find that the CPU workload increases with the higher preset. And this is seen when switching to Epic, which extended the lead for the Zen 5 part, now out to an 18% margin. So that's the biggest margin we've seen so far, and not that dissimilar to the 20% highs seen in the previous 45 game benchmark. And speaking of 20% gains, the 9800X3D is blazing fast in Baldur's Gate 3, delivering exactly 20% more performance than the 7800X3D when using the medium preset, and then 23% when using Ultra. So a commanding lead here for the Zen 5 part. Finally, we have Counter-Strike 2, and here the 9800X3D was 10% faster using the medium preset, and then just 5% faster with very high. So a decent performance uplift, especially when using the medium preset, which in this example does reduce the GPU bottleneck. Okay, so previously across 45 games, I found that the 9800X3D was on average 8% faster. And in this updated 12 game sample, you won't believe it, but the 9800X3D is 8% faster than the 7800X3D when using the medium settings, and wait for it, 8% faster when using the ultra settings. So yeah, on average, looks to be 8% faster. Now just quickly, when it comes to shader compilation performance, we saw next to no difference between the 9600X and 7600X for the Marvel Rivals test. But despite that, the 9800X3D was 5% faster than the 7800X3D. Certainly not a massive margin, but look, it is a margin. Likewise, the 9600X was just 3% faster than the 7600X when it came to shader compilation performance in The Last of Us Part 1, whereas the 9800X3D was 14% faster than the 7800X3D, so quite a significant improvement there. Despite that though, we only saw a very mild 4% improvement for the 9800X3D in Stalker 2 Heart of Chernobyl. So, as was the case a year ago, the 9800X3D still looks to be just 8% faster than the 7800X3D, which in my opinion is an unimpressive generational gain, and it makes the 9800X3D a bit boring in that sense. But also, the 9800X3D has been anything but boring. There's loads of hype for this part, and I think that's just because it is the world's fastest gaming CPU. So, I guess any gains there are noteworthy. Also, AMD played the game quite well here, so a rare strategic move from the red team that didn't end in a dumpster fire type situation. And the strategy was to help the 9800X3D right out of the gate. AMD preemptively cut supply of the 7800X3D, making it appear as though that part had been discontinued leading up to the release of the 9800X3D, and therefore nullifying the price advantage of the previous generation part, given that you could no longer get it, so price is null and void. Now what happened here was, just months before the 9800X3D was set to arrive and reviews would appear online, the 7800X3D was retailing for as low as $340 US. That's an insane bargain at that price, and this was available in mid-2024. And this was a really big problem for AMD, as they wanted to ask $480 US for the 9800X3D. That's a 41% premium for a part that's not even 10% faster on average. So that was not going to go down well, and AMD knew it. Just months prior, the 9600X and 9700X bombed hard, as they cost considerably more than the existing Zen 4 parts, while offering very little in the way of additional performance. Now wise to this problem, AMD artificially dried up the 7800X3D supply, causing pricing for remaining stock to skyrocket in early August, from the lows of $340 US to at least $450 US by the time the 9800X3D arrived in November. It wasn't until April the following year that the 7800X3D started to drop in price, before hitting the recent low of $340 US last month, though it is back up at $360 US right now. Still, $360 US is a very good price for the 7800X 3D, especially when you're typically looking at having to spend around $480 US, a 33% premium for the 9800X 3D. So with the 7800X 3D in seemingly strong supply right now, at near record low prices, I get why so many of you are asking me right now if it's worth buying in favor of the 9800X 3D. And the answer is quite simply yes. Do that, get it while you can. We're very likely looking at a 5800X 3D type situation, meaning availability won't last forever, so don't risk missing out. I'm sure at some point though in the future the 9800X 3D will see similar discounts, so it's not quite the same situation, and it won't be as dire as AM4 because there will be more processors released on AM5. But if you're desperately in need of a better gaming performance right now from your CPU, then really nothing holds a candle to the value of the 7800X 3D at these lower $340 US, $360 US price points. Across most regions right now, the 9800X 3D costs at least 30% more. The only outlier from the large regions that I checked out was the UK, where the 9800X 3D costs about 20% more. But even then, I still feel like the 7800X 3D is the better value choice, because while the 9800X 3D can deliver up to 20% better gaming performance, you're typically looking at less than 10%. So paying such a large price premium for the newer Zen 5 part, it doesn't really make sense right now. So then, the best value high-end AM5 CPU available right now is the 7800X 3D. And I'm sure if it was available for these low prices when the 9800X 3D was first launched, reviews and public perception would have been far less positive towards the Zen 5 part. And that is going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed it, do the thing, subscribe for more content, and we also have the join button or Patreon if you want to become a Hardware Box member. It will give you access to our exclusive Discord server, monthly live streams, Q&A stuff, and behind the scenes content. So check that out if you're interested, but if not, it's perfectly fine. And I would like to thank you for watching this video. I'm your host, Steve. See you again next time.